Welcome back to LA Show. Thank you guys so much for tuning back in with me. I have Cisco here. Welcome back, Cisco.
Hey, thank you for having me back.
Of course. So, a lot of people have seen the Nipsey Hussle BBC documentary, and a lot of people have a lot of things to say about this said documentary. Um, First of all, I thought it was interesting. Um, a guy from a whole nother area, a whole nother culture was able to come in and speak to a lot of different people. Um, hmm. Do you want me to go ahead and start off with the first person that he spoke with and just go on and then you chime in with whatever notes you took?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. All right. So the first person that his name is Ben Zand, right? The interviewer.
Right.
Yes. Ben Zand spoke with was Kenyatta Griggs, an old friend of Nipsey Hussle. And one key statement that I took from him was when he said, as many people love you, there are people who hate you. How did you respond to that, Cisco?
Well, it's been that notion has been a consistent theme throughout the case. That and that's why in a previous video, that's why I related it to the Malcolm and Martin assassinations because um, in both cases you there were haters amongst his clique that were used against him. I can't necessarily prove that in Nipsey's case, but again, him saying it would just not, ring a bell in my head that that's a consistent theme.
Correct, correct. Now, for me, it took me, back to when we did the different interviews video I had put together, and a lot of information was in those two videos. A lot of information. It took me back to a specific interview from Lil Sodi, and that interview came about a year before any of this even happened.
Right.
Wasn't that from like 2018?
20. I think it was 2017.
Okay, somewhere around there. And I mean, his statement has been ringing in my head for a while since I heard the video. And you guys can go back and watch that video. I do believe it's one of the first um, videos that pop up. So Ben Zan goes on and he speaks about Nipsey Hussle's heritage and where he comes from originally, or his bloodline, Eritrea. And he speaks on Nipsey visiting Eritrea. And, we spoke on that as well, how he did transcend internationally along his marathon. And how that could put a lot of heat on you too, depending on what you're teaching and what you're spreading in both America and Africa.
Hmm.
So, that was a good little topic he spoke on. So he also spoke on Nipsey's success in music. I do believe he said 1.8 billion streams.
Right.
So that is, I mean, amazing. Um, wow. That means, a lot of people love this man as well as people that may have hated him, just as many haters. So then Ben Zan speaks with Siobhan Taylor, and she's a local radio host. And I enjoyed hearing from her. Um, she brought up the fact that Nipsey not only taught, but he invited people to join him in building up the Black community. We spoke on that several times as well too, right?
Absolutely.
Just with the whole gentrification, um, buying back the block, having all his ducks in a row so people couldn't tell him no at a certain point, and we'll get to that. Um, Brandon Sakara, and he was a community activist that was interviewed. Um, he brought up the fact that Nipsey had patience and that he stayed where he came from and how that was commendable. Um, and I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't feel like nobody should have to tuck their tail and hide. And I feel as though even though the dirt that may have been done back in the day and gang banging and all that good stuff, I don't feel like he should have been targeted, especially while he was out here doing things to make up for whatever, his past was. But that's just me. And other people can feel however they feel. How do you feel about that, Cisco?
Well, I feel you shouldn't be, but I feel that you will be.
Hmm.
And I made that kind of clear in the previous video when we made the video talking about when I was saying that Nipsey didn't know the environment or the
Yeah.
playing field that he was entering in, and he didn't have
Conglomerate.
his his constituency and infrastructure wasn't set up to where
Mm.
he could make those moves because there's a certain political environment in LA and they're moving in a certain direction, and a lot of the information that I collected on that I didn't even share. There's certain things that are really that even point fingers, or not necessarily point fingers, but directly show that Nipsey's plans were not in the scope of what they planned for that area,
Hmm.
and so yeah, I don't believe that it should have happened, but I know that if you don't have everything in place, that's what's gonna happen. You can look at an example of uh, Mayor Marion Barry's first term and what he did for the DC in terms of creating jobs and getting the economic flow in the Black community. And you see what happened to him. You could look at the late Harold Washington. Well, actually, both of them are late now, but the late Harold Washington in Chicago, same thing. And you saw what happened to him. So you can even go back as far as the Marcus Garvey, and
Hmm.
you see what happened to him. So those are lessons that if you set out to do things and there's a certain political environment, there's only going to be a certain way that you can move in that environment without, and even still, it's still going to come. The assassination attempts will come. The slandering of your name and blasting you in the media. The the You'll see that the police will be against you, the city council will be against you, the city planners will be against you, um, and that's just the way it is, unfortunately.
Hmm. Well, that's just very unfortunate. But it is very clear, I do get it. I get it. But, that's just my feeling. So Ben Zan speaks on Jamon Hicks, a civil rights attorney. Gangs exist, but focus on the good in the area. So he did explain that Nipsey was in a gang. However, like I was saying, he was trying to make things better, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and it wasn't just in an activist way. He was actually boots on the ground, starting up businesses, starting up trades, and just doing mega things that have never been done before in the community. So that's just, like I said, a jewel to lose. Um, so the next person, I really enjoyed his statement as well. The man at the marathon selling CDs, I think he had on a Lakers jersey. He said they closed the shop, um, of course, and then somebody didn't want him here. That's what he explained. And then the difference in his music, like he said, Nipsey wasn't out here talking about shaking ass and, all this other stuff like you hear. He was out here telling young brothers how to get it, and starting a movement pretty much with his words out here to the public. Um, do you remember that guy? How did you take his statement, Cisco?
Well, again, that's another. What he said is it's another common theme that, and we've heard this in several different, even in this documentary later on, and I won't say where it comes, so I'll let you keep on saying the names and stuff. But the notion that Nipsey, what I just previously said, and that just compounds that the notion that they didn't want Nipsey to own that property. They didn't want Nipsey to, um, with his background and his affiliation, they did not want that
Mhm.
kind of person to enter the real estate and economic scene. They didn't want to they did not want to, in their minds, they probably think that they're legitimizing a criminal organization.
Okay. Well, this thing goes on to explain what took place on March 31st of 2019. He says that at 2:50 p.m., a tweet went out from Nipsey Hussle, having strong enemies is a blessing. 10 minutes later, he arrives at the store. This is what Ben Zand is saying. He says he takes some pictures with some fans. CCTV sees a man just eating chili fries approach Nipsey. At that point, they said the man comes back with guns in each of his hands. That's what Benzan says. So then he speaks on the visual that happened the next day, which was packed out. I mean, Nipsey literally brought the whole city down to his store. He also mentions conspiracy theories. Um, and then also he brings up the fake killer on live, that one guy.
Right. I want to just something that I have repeated throughout my notes, which is at some points in this documentary, and you just mentioned one,
Hmm.
um, I got the feeling of a hit piece. That's when, the media wants to drive a notion home. So
Hmm.
with the visuals and the words, there's a certain picture that's intended to be painted, and that's the thing you just mentioned about him eating the chili fries, and they're showing visuals at that time, okay? And he has guns in two hands. That's driving. That's that's where he's uh, using part of the things that he's obviously seen in the grand jury transcripts, and
Hmm.
trying to paint a picture as it is the truth, you
Because I
know.
have from volume.
Well, my point is that to the average viewer, the
Mhm.
average viewer didn't read the grand jury transcripts. The average viewer probably watched some YouTube videos from different avenues, different YouTubers, if that. So they're going to believe what is presented because it's along with visuals. And that's what I'm saying. That's what you call in journalism, that's a hit piece. That's not, I can say, honest journalism, in my opinion, in my humble estimation, or even honest investigative journalism. He's saying he's trying to figure it out. Well, if you're trying to figure it out, just because it was stated in the grand jury doesn't mean that's what it is. And you didn't frame it that you got it from the grand jury testimony. You framed it as this is what this person did.
Correct.
That's why I'm saying it's you're spoon feeding me now.
Okay. Well, we're going to get into some more instances. Okay. I like that. So, Ben Zand got an interview with Marquisha Lawson. Now, I know a lot of people have seen the videos, have looked at her in their own way, and it was just very interesting to me that she finally spoke. Um, very very interesting to me, but also what she said, just what she said rang volumes, and I wanted you to explain that scenario between them because I know you have some notes on that. Um, but I do want to point out that she did bring up the death threats that she did receive, and you know, I just find that very very interesting. Just I find it interesting. How do you feel about this, Cisco?
Well, again, like I said, once I start seeing signs of hit pieces, you can usually find them throughout the documentary. And in the Marquisha section, there was definitely something. When she was asked, why do you think uh, people were looking towards you? She goes on to say her her brief explanation, and then she starts a sentence talking about if you in the hood, you can't just be unknown and walk up on somebody. It had to be someone in the inside, and he cut her at that moment, which would give the impression to a person that didn't notice that there was a cut, an edit, uh, that she's even more guilty. Why? Because somebody asked you why you think uh why do they think you're part of this murder, and you say, well, in order to get close to somebody, there has to be somebody on the inside, and she's on the inside. But he cuts her sentence off to where she could have potentially probably said, and that's why they think that I'm part of the Nipsey Hussle murder. But
Hmm.
she doesn't have that opportunity. I'm not defending her. I'm just saying, from a looking at this documentary and how it's being laid out, he robbed her the opportunity in editing of explaining herself, but it made it to a person like, again, I've been investigating this, but I have to put myself out of myself and say, hey, what if I was looking at this documentary and I don't know nothing about the Nipsey Hussle murder?
Right.
It would still make me raise my eyebrows at Marquisha.
Yeah, that was very
Based on,
interesting.
yeah.
He did that with another person too, and we'll get to that.
And then another thing he did. This is another just before you start that. you're gonna find that in certain instances, the last word that the interviewee says, he goes on a litany or he says a few statements about that subject.
Correct.
So he did that with Markeisha and he did that with Blaze also. Oh, well, we'll get to that. Go ahead. So I just wanted to say that. So that was a little tactic that he was using. So if you listen to the interviews, the last word the person says, he goes on that notion.
He also does the same thing that you explained earlier about um, pretty much putting this weirdness around a person, like Marquisha, how he edited her off. I feel as though he put some type of stank on Big U, but that was through editing and the fact that he never got to say anything. Just like with Marquisha, she got cut off before she could fully say anything. He never even got to say anything. But okay.
It's also interesting that you mentioned Big U because if you're an investigative journalist, Big U has a store that he owns. He has a nonprofit organization with an office that he runs. If I'm not mistaken, Big U is not hard to find,
Hmm.
and you didn't display any. There's no depiction of you really trying to get in contact with Big U other than what you showed us.
He's showing
And
up on
so,
everybody. He pulled up to the let me
right.
keep so Eric Holder, he brings up Eric Holder, Ben Zandas, same gang. He associates Nipsey Hussle and Eric Holder under the same gang, Rolling 60s. Neighbors, he goes to speak to some neighbors of
Right.
Blaze Carafello. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, of Eric Holder. And the neighbors was like, one person, you could hear them, they was like, get your ass on. And they didn't say all that, but they were pretty much like, no. And then he says the neighbors were too scared to talk. So then he gets a phone call. And
Yeah.
that phone call is from a person that I'm gonna give all the credit to Cisco. Because when he sent me that, my mouth dropped. Because what would make you think of the case? And it says it in the daggone title. What would make you think that the case would lead all the way to New Jersey? And who is this person that's linked to this case all the way in New Jersey? And what does he have to say? So Ben Zan gets a interview with the guy, Blaze Carafello. Very, very interesting the statement that Blaze gave. So, first of all, he described Eric Holder as a normal person. And then also, he brought up the fact that he worked in a restaurant or something to that effect, that he has heard Eric Holder's music before and he wasn't really a big fan. Um, I do believe he said something about seeing his family before. And also, he was sitting at his apartment and he was on the phone, and Eric Holder had just came by, knocked on the door. Then he noticed that Eric Holder was hyping himself up. And then he paints the picture that Eric Holder, this is not what was said in the article, that Eric Holder accused him of lacing some marijuana.
Right.
And at this point, I do believe he explains, yes, he does, that Eric Holder was loud. So that means that other people may have heard this or came outside and witnessed this, or, y'all are in an apartment complex. Um, So that's another thing I want to bring up. Were there witnesses to this whole exchange between you and Eric Holder? Came up from behind and hit him in the head hard. He said hard. Then he explained that he didn't know what he was hit with until after Nipsey was shot. Then the next thing that I wrote down is that he appeared, he had an agenda. That is what Blaze Carafello said. How do you feel about Mr. Carafello, Cisco? We've been we've been looking at him since the beginning.
Well, this is another red flag for Mr. Carafello. Number one, I'm still calling this documentary a hit piece because you didn't call him by Blaze Carafello in the documentary, but
Mhm.
me and LA know because we've been working the case that was Blaze Carafello or someone portraying him, just based on the narrative that he shared. Uh, the thing that he had a menace to society moment in this interview. If y'all didn't catch it, and what I mean by menace to society moment is when Kane gets arrested and he's in the interrogation room and the cop and says, "You know you done fucked up now." So he had that moment, and that was when he said that when Eric Holder accused him of selling him some lace weed, he says, "What is this guy trying to do? Set me up?" Now, at that moment, you're not allowed to have that thought at all because you don't know the future. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what's going to happen in the next few moments. You're not allowed to say, is he going to set me up? And then what confirms it more, and it just the nail in the coffin, is I don't know if he was trying to, if Nipsey Hussle was premeditated. You're not
Yeah,
allowed to think that at that moment. The moment Eric is trying to check you on some lace weed, you can't be thinking about no setup. You can't be thinking about it. So that was a big red flag for Blaze. You just, making people like me in LA look at you real funny.
and
And the crazy thing is also, as an investigative journalist, this is trash. This is a hit piece. You don't ask him why he fled to New Jersey.
I
Uh,
was about to say
you don't interview the two girls or the attorney or try to, or it's not part of the documentary that you tried to.
correct.
Uh, you don't even ask him what happens next after you got hit in the head. You don't ask him, did you call the police? What happened next? None of that. So that again is to me, you are spoon feeding me. You're trying to spoon feed me a story.
Yeah,
This is not what the mystery, what did they call it? The mystery of mystery. This is not the mystery. It's your version of a mystery, and it's trash. And up to this point, because this is just terrible. And that's I could go on, but I'm gonna stop there.
okay. 'Cause I was about to say. So then Benzan brings up the two guns, and you had said that from the very beginning, Cisco. When we were having private conversations, you said it's two guns. Now, what we meant by that is something totally different than what they're saying or what they're
Right,
trying to show you with the visuals.
right,
Um, and then they also bring up Benzan also brings up hired gunman theory. So
right.
then this dude pulls up on some dudes that look like it, they'll get it popping. real quick, the Black Riders. And they had a newspaper article that describes, what they felt and the Black Riders and what they represent for Nipsey Hussle, and that they felt as though the government was involved. Now, they also were definitely on the Eric Holder being a snitch theory. What I liked about General Taco and what he explained was that Nipsey was about, F the police and F the other higher ups. And also that he brought up the question of if Eric Holder was a police informant, was he on the payroll the day of the murder? I like that. Fact that the government is putting a seal on information about Eric Holder allegedly being a snitch. I like that information that he dropped there. And then he's never heard of Eric Holder either, which is another thing that's strange. If this is such a big production and you wanted to put this information out there, why aren't you talking to somebody that knows Eric Holder? Um, and this was one day before a truce in LA. He also brought that up, a gang truce in LA. So the Black Riders, you got anything to say about them, Cisco?
I do, and I'm gonna have to make a disclaimer on this one. Um, Two disclaimers. The first one is the views and opinions of Cisco have no reflection on the views and opinions of the LA show on this particular part. That's my first disclaimer. My second disclaimer is what I'm going to say is in no way, shape, or form to point any fingers at the Black Riders or General Taco specifically or anybody affiliated with them. But I gotta talk transparently because I'm looking at this documentary for what it is. Um, I agree with all the points that you made, LA. Those are very good, valid points that were brought up. But by the time I got to this point in the documentary, I'm already feeling like this is a hit piece. And I'm just gonna say my raw initial feelings. And I felt this a hit piece strategic tactic to interview the Black Writers. Number one, why? Because the whole Black revolutionary movement, if you go back to its origins, once they realized the landscape of America, what was their notion? The revolution will not be televised, meaning everything that was above the ground now goes underground. So throughout and I have a long, extensive research on different Black revolutionary groups just because it was something that I wanted to know personally. And in 2020, you have to know that in any group that makes it on a watch list, they have an infiltrator, no doubt. And even in this documentary, they shows that they're being watched. So this gave me the feeling of this is some clandestine. This is it gives you the mystique of this is some clandestine meeting with this ultra extreme radical group. The leader is uh, uh, loud spoken and boisterous. And I'm not taking a shot at him. He doesn't have. I'm just saying this. This is the personification that they're trying to portray. He doesn't have good dental hygiene, and this is what it reminded me of. What when I think it was ABC News when they interviewed Osama bin Laden in the cave in Afghanistan. It reminded me of when they interviewed Saddam Hussein. This super clandestine super extreme radical. It just adds a juiciness to the documentary. Um, I didn't like that portrayal of them. I'm not a
Okay.
black. I didn't like it
I get
because it.
I understand what you're saying because even when I was watching it, I was like, what the heck is going on? You know, they had to put the cameras down and oh, we're
Yeah,
being
it's
filmed and
sensationalism. They wanted to give you that this is some super clandestine, but yet a BBC reporter walked right up on you.
exactly. That was crazy. And that's what we also said about Marquisha and other people in this documentary. The fact that you guys don't want to do interviews with people that look like you. Um, that's crazy.
Yeah. The other things about my notes is that similar to what you said is that one thing that General Taco said that is potentially and highly likely to be true is that, and we discovered this, and you can discover it yourself. It's in the grand jury transcripts that Eric
Mhm.
Holder's records are sealed, and some of
Correct.
his stuff is redacted.
Also
Uh,
witness
Go ahead.
also witness one.
Yeah, yeah, but I'm just
Yeah, I
really
mean, he made a
really
valid point. Yeah,
I'm just validating the thing that General Taco said in the documentary because that's something that we know is for sure truth. I mean, we don't have to go into that again, but I mean, because we've done it before, but they have a highly sophisticated way of identifying people, and that's not how they did it in the grand jury.
correct.
And and they talked about his information being redacted. Some of his
Correct.
information is redacted.
Yeah.
And that's basically all I wanted to say on that. I just looked at it as a cheesy way out of all the people to talk to in LA, you just had to throw the juiciness of the black writers. And at the same time, I'm shocked that they even talked to them because as I know it, the revolution won't be televised. But nowadays, and that's why I don't know. I'm going on. I can go in a different direction on that, but let
Yeah.
me stop.
So then Benzan brings up black men going against status quo. He brings up Malcolm X, brings up MLK Jr. and Fred Hampton.
Hmm.
Then they go into the interviews again with Brandon Sakara, the community activist. He says police and government agencies orchestrating murders forever. They've been doing this.
Hmm.
And, that's not something that anybody should be like, oh, what? No, y'all know this. Then he speaks with Robert Lee Jackson, a historian and a Black Panther. Meeting with estate, he said that Nipsey was meeting with his estate and being influential to the youth. And I felt as though he picked his words wisely when he said what he said. You know, we know that Nipsey Hussle had a lot of things going on with the marathon at the time of his assassination. And we also know the presence and the influence that he did hold in his neighborhood and around the world.
Hmm.
Jamon Hicks, the civil rights attorney, the same one that he spoke with earlier, um, people didn't want to see him survive, uniting the community. That's pretty much what, I surmised from Jamon Hicks and his statement, which I thought that was an interesting, way to put it.
Right.
Siobhan Taylor, okay, yeah, Siobhan Taylor, she was the radio host. She said that the attorney general shut down the store. So how could they trust the LAPD, knowing them for, terrorizing the community, which is something that, I'm sure countless people have stories, and things that they have seen. And, I mean, come on now. I mean, recently we've seen things on YouTube like from a million hits and, people that's out here really getting on the inside of things.
Right.
Nipsey Hussle's relationship with the police. So Ben Zan goes on to describe it how I guess he views it. He said it was a tense interaction between Nipsey Hussle and the police. At least 20 times Nipsey Hussle was arrested. There was an active investigation on Nipsey's property, which we all know. The city attorney's office where we're tracking Nipsey's property. And then he also brought up a 2018 brawl that took place at Nipsey Hussle school.
Right. Which we've both seen.
Correct. Yeah. So then we get to him pulling up on Vector 90. And he speaks with Marquise Harris Dawson, the city council man. And he brings up, that he was pictured with the mayor, the chief of the police, and the police commissioner at the press conference on Nipsey's murder. Marquise Harris Dawson, he said some things, but I'm not going to lie, his part kind of confused me.
I
Um,
know it. I know. I know it was going to.
okay. Never heard Nip talk about the police. Police did talk about him. Okay. Gun pointed at him 5 times, 4 times by the police. I thought that was interesting. And now he is standing in a very powerful position. Um, and kudos to him. Confirms going to talk with Nipsey and the LAPD. So he did confirm that there was a meeting. He was tracking the investigation with Nip's property and the LAPD. And then the last thing that I got from him, someone had a vendetta against Nipsey and his family. People are still around.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about Marquise Harris Dawson?
Well, I knew that was going to be confusing to some that have been following the case because, well, especially you, not really people. Really, I'm talking about you because we know things that we didn't share on your channel,
Yeah.
but I wasn't I wasn't expecting Marquise Green to say those things uh, with the position that he has in politics, and I just didn't expect that because one thing that we discovered that the vision of Nipsey and Marquise wasn't exactly on the same page.
Mm,
Um, Not saying that he was an enemy to Nipsey, but
mm,
definitely uh, if he was considering his political, I think that's the fine line of these. I don't know if Marquise is a thoroughbred or he's a regular dude. But if he's a regular dude, he's going to come to the point where he has to focus on his political career or helping the community. And if he now, based on what he's saying in this documentary, if it's sincere, you would think that he's more on the lines of helping the community, because the last thing a city councilman will want to do is speak ill of the LAPD, and that's exactly what he did.
Well, I do believe he really did try to choose his words wisely. Um, that was a very interesting interaction.
And it confirms also a lot of our other wider scoped notions about the Nipsey Hussle assassination,
Right.
because he's saying that they are a target.
Correct. So,
That's different than being on the radar.
and then he also said someone had a vendetta against Nip. So you say that with conviction, like you know that. Of course, not just based off the murder itself, but you saying that like you know that or you've been knowing that because like you
And
said, you never heard Nip talk about the police, but you've heard the police talk about Nipsey.
and the
So
key word he said was LAPD and beyond.
correct.
LAPD and beyond. Nipsey and his family were a target by the LAPD and beyond.
Mm, mm. So the conversation between oh, okay, here we go. Ben Zan said that the family isn't happy about the LAPD saying something about the gang meeting with Nipsey. Um,
I understood that, but yeah, I understood that because of how that would possibly be interpreted by certain individuals.
but is that something that they came out and said?
I have no idea.
Okay.
Yeah, that has to be verified. Um,
I mean, if we're going from Marquise Harris Dawson to then Ben Zan saying that, I don't know, but okay. So, convo between Eric Holder and Nipsey before the shooting. The word snitch is mentioned 24 times in the transcripts, according to Ben Zan. Brian Bentley, a former LAPD officer, he explained that there is no trust between the community and LAPD, of course. Doesn't think the LAPD had anything to do with it, even if Eric Holder was a snitch. All officers accept death. And then he explained that if you disrespect somebody, then you should know the ramifications for that.
Now, see, I didn't. This is where I felt another big part of the hit piece, because you get a retired police officer to shut down the notion of police involvement right after you have a city councilman pointing the finger at the police department, um, and making the life of Nipsey insignificant. Nipsey's life was an expected death. Uh, that's one thing he said there, that this was we weren't shocked that he died this way. This is what we expect. Uh,
Hmm.
he said the police are there to beat people, arrest people, and lock people up, plain and simple. Also, he uses the snitch theory to promote something that's happening in America, and I mentioned it on a video, I don't know which one, is that this is the era of snitches. Snitches, if you look it up, make the best of them, the best snitches and informants make hundreds of thousands, even in the millions. Okay? So in the era of snitching, he promotes the snitch theory, that because nowadays snitches are making money and they're able to walk around without harm. Okay? Snitches nowadays are, look at Takashi 69. Uh Look at the average inner city in America. You got people who snitched, who did the same crime or involved in the same crime and snitched, and they're walking around freely. So in this respect, in this, the way he's putting it off, Nipsey is disrespectful to the snitch. And if you disrespect the snitch, you should know what's gonna come.
That's a good way to look at that.
Yeah, that's how I look at it. That's exactly how I look at it because first of all, the snitch theory is a theory to me. It's not is it fact? It's documented. Okay. But if you collect all facts about this snitch theory, you can see that it exists and it doesn't exist. It exists and it doesn't exist.
Correct. From different
But
people.
the thing, but the thing that you're trying to drive is that Nipsey disrespected Eric Holder for calling him a snitch. Now, how do you get to define what disrespect is in the streets? And then they try to, okay, they'll go to some OGs. If somebody call me a snitch, this is the ultimate. If it's true, it's not disrespect. If it's true, it's not disrespect. Am I? I mean, come on.
Hmm.
First of all, if the person really is a snitch and you call him a snitch, how is it disrespect for telling the truth?
I don't know.
You see what I'm saying? That's why that is fuckery. I'm sorry, I had to say it.
You
It
good?
just it. Uh, and you keep hearing this over and over throughout the time you following this case. He disrespected
Correct.
him. He disrespected him. This is a
Correct.
way of rewriting the narrative of right and wrong, rewriting the narrative of disrespect.
Correct.
Di-
Like Nipsey did
disrespect would
something.
be disrespect would be I got things moving, and if you wasn't hot, I could probably put you on. But you
Right.
coming here to my place where I'm making things move, and you hot as fish grease, you disrespected me, man.
Get your ass on. Yeah. And like he said, get the fuck on. Allegedly in this snitch theory, which I've talked to somebody who was there on the scene and they never said anything about a snitch theory. Did they say that things got heated and tense? Yes. So,
You can even go to the star witnesses. Herman Douglas, does he agree with the snitch theory all the time? No. Kerry Latham, does he agree with the snitch theory all the time? No. Kid Flashy, does he agree with the snitch theory all the time? No. Does Witness One agree with the snitch theory all the time? No. They all got janky statements on that.
and then that takes us back to the fact of what the Black Rider said. See, you're setting this up and you think you know what you're doing, BBC, but you really don't. Because what the Black Riders just said is that we, the public, don't know if Eric Holder was a snitch or not. Nobody can verify that or deny that. So this also goes along with the fact of what Cisco said. Who's really getting disrespected here? So,
Allegedly, and this is what I call bullshit until I see it, allegedly, there was paperwork going around that you can't find now, online at least, or even a link to it, even if you got a Pacer account. Allegedly, there's paperwork out that was out there. That's what goes along with this snitch theory, that there was paperwork out there that Eric Holder was snitching. But
well,
that paperwork has never been. And you know what? Remember when we did the show about the um, Attorney Young's public defender Young's motions? She wants all the records.
Mm-hmm.
Which the first thing that hit me is that I bet you she don't believe in this snitch theory, and that is the crust of their case.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that because I'm not a defender of Eric Holder. I don't even know who this guy is. He's a ghost to me. And LA knows that. I say that offline all the time. He's a ghost to me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know
Oh,
who he is.
I don't know who the brother is either. Hmm.
You got all kind of different street names with this dude. You got all kind of different all, that's a whole nother story.
It's a whole nother
But
story that we will get to. We will get to all that because this is crazy. So Ben Zan goes on to say that Nipsey is a complicated character. He calls him a hero to the community. He also brings up the fact that Nipsey has made homophobic comments in the past, and also that he is a
yes,
gang member and run
that's
in with the law.
that's the part of the hit piece too, because you insinuate that Nipsey's a disrespectful person to drive that point home.
But
You
wait a
showed
minute,
the little you showed the incident in the parking lot on the documentary.
correct. Then also he goes on to talk to some OGs. And these dudes are from the eight trays. I didn't catch their names. And
Well, one
they
of
were
them one of them was OG Melvin.
okay. Oh, okay. OG Melvin. And
But you
then
have him on your interviews video.
yeah, I know who you talk about now. Yeah, I know who you talk about. Melvin Farmer.
Right.
Law of the street. They were there to discuss the law of the street. Said he wasn't on a trade. He wasn't. One of them said he's not a. Oh no, if somebody said he wasn't an eight trade no more, they would have to leave the city. And then he said, BP, you know what that is. Y'all know what that is. All gang members have to kill. And then he said, snitch equals the same thing as a child molester. He also explains that Nipsey was stupid. His gang didn't and wasn't going to protect him. And that's what he said verbatim. And too risky to have shop on Slauson. Never should have been at the store with no security. He got shot at the store and his friends didn't have his back or didn't shoot back. Friends didn't like him.
I'm gonna minus the stupid statement. I can't say I disagree with anything he said, because we've said it indirect. I've said it indirectly. I wasn't gonna say that he shouldn't have the shop, but definitely if you have the shop on Crenshaw and Slauson, you gotta have security. You gotta have some hitters. You gotta have some legit hitters and some non-legit hitters. And y'all know what I'm talking about like that. I mean, you just have to. That's just the way it is. Um, and based on things that I've researched and heard, that Nipsey didn't have a lot of backup in it within his set.
Well, from what I understand and what we were told is that the bodyguard was given a day off.
Yeah, a lot
So,
of a lot of people will take issue to that, but that's an official statement made by the bodyguard. So you got to take it as it is, and you can choose whether or not to believe him. But I don't have no reason not to believe him.
right. Well, the OG spoke and they said what they said. But then Ben Zan comes back in and he says signs pointing to a disagreement in Nipsey's gang. Eric
Right.
Holder was a low level gang member. Others at the top of the food chain would have, pretty much summoned this if that were the case, is what Ben Zan was trying to say.
Right.
So then he talks to Charles Slay, and he's a former gang member. He's been to jail for first degree murder. He speaks to Latanya Ward, a former gang member, and she discussed having their own system within the gangs. Of course, you know, people we've all been in the neighborhoods. We all know how tight knit gangs are. They work as like a second family. Um, Brandon Sakara comes back in, the community activist, and then he speaks on the fact that there are shells of law enforcement agencies. Now, I just found that interesting. But I also found it interesting that Benzan goes on and to bring up somebody that he tried to get in contact with, but said that they didn't want any parts of it. You know, he said that Big U did decline the interview. So putting him in the interview, I mean, or in the documentary was, you know, yeah,
That was a
release of
shot.
that was a shot. That was a foul. Relate he says that well, this has been Zan speaking on Big U. Release of Nipsey Hussle's first album. He was there and a part of. A former LAPD officer told him via an anonymous email, which is I don't know why he said it like that because emails can't be anonymous, but he explained that this former LAPD officer
They
told
can. They can. You can get it on anonymous email.
told him to look into Big U. Then he also said that there was a shootout in 2011 and there was speculation of jealousy and money issues between Nipsey Hussle and Big U, which that's all I'm gonna say. Just like they was laughing, I'm gonna laugh too. Declined interview, multiple attempts after multiple attempts, and used the video of him speaking, Big U speaking on the text message that was going around. I thought that was like you said, that was a shot.
Yeah.
So then he speaks to Tanisha. This woman is in Las Vegas. She's a former gang member, and also she worked with Nipsey. She knows about Big U and Nipsey's relationship. So I found that very interesting. Since you can't go to Big U, you go to this woman. Someone knows other than the LAPD and Eric Holder. A lot more people were involved in this situation. Jealousy with everybody. Nothing happens without permission, is what she stated. Don't like when younger people are in charge. How did you feel about that one?
She's reiterating a common theme we've heard before. And I found it kind of strange that she would put herself out there like that. Yes, we are under quarantine now, but um, if what she was saying is true, that's pretty dangerous statements that she made. Um, Kind of incriminating, pointing direction at the '60s and the the OGs or the elders of the '60s. Um, pointing in their direction, and and at the same time she's pointing at saying the same thing, that it's bigger than just the '60s.
Hmm.
So yeah.
Well, she
And
kept saying,
and the thing that a lot of people know about this that aren't talking, and I've told you, my situation with people and family members that I know in LA and connected to, even the 60s. People aren't talking.
Yeah. Well, this is what Benzan comes in to say because she kept saying, I can't tell you because you're not a part of the society. You're not a part of the secret society. And Benzan chimes in and he says, can't tell him because he's not a gang member. He learned that there was a lot of people who did not want Nipsey around. He also said that he learned that the streets may have killed Nipsey. The thing that Nipsey loved so much killed him. And that's not what Nipsey loved. Nipsey loved the hustle, he loved the grind. He didn't love necessarily the streets. He loved his people. But whatever. So at the end of this, they put out that LAPD had no comments on this documentary and that they are, not trying to speak to him about this ongoing investigation. So that is the documentary, you guys. That's how we felt about this. Whew, it took us a while to get through, but like we like to do, we like to make it thorough. Um, I think we did a really good job. We are definitely going to do something for Nipsey's anniversary, his homegoing anniversary. Um, Stay on the lookout for that. I will give updates throughout the day. And Cisco, do you have any closing things to say?
No, thank you guys for listening. Thank you, LA, for having me back on, and let's tune in for more.
We will be back. Thank you guys.